portfolio review. Let's go! There is no version of this video where I talk about my portfolio and do not talk about the Sohn House. Anyone who's been following me on social media now for the last year or so knows that I really love this house. So much so that I've also made previous videos on the Sohn House. But I really have to talk about the Sohn House here in the context of my portfolio and my thesis project. And so here we are. So what you're seeing here now on the screen is a survey drawing of the Sohn House that I produced back in 2016 as part of my written dissertation. And on the right is a photograph of a sketchbook that I carried around with me on one of my many trips to the Sohn House. So what you're seeing here is, again, just another number of photographs of sketches. I have no idea why I pinned these sketchbooks up. I think there was a problem with the light, and the only way I could photograph them in any decent way was to pin them up and clip them onto a wall. But in any case, you're seeing a series of sketches here now, which basically reflect my observations from a number of visits to the Sohn House. Not the best sketches, but it's relevant nonetheless. So really at the beginning of this sort of portfolio journey, this thesis journey of mine, we were each assigned a house, a precedent, and we were challenged to survey that house and then develop an architectural proposal that we argued would improve that house. And because the Sohn House was one of the houses that were available to us, and I had already written my dissertation on the Sohn House, I asked if I could use the Sohn House for the basis of this project. So what you're seeing here now is actually two drawings that I produced as part of this elaboration exercise, where we would take a part of an existing house and study it and then propose an architectural intervention within it. So either we would add something, we would remove something, we would tweak something, and it was a way of sort of understanding how we worked as architects and how you can do quite a little to make quite a lot happen with an existing architectural space. And in a way, this Sohn House study in conjunction with the dissertation itself became the entire foundation of the thesis and the portfolio itself, and you're going to see that now as we go along. So what you're seeing here now is an cutaway isometric drawing of the entrance threshold to the Sohn House, and then this artfully rendered section drawing that sort of demonstrates the sequence of spaces upon arrival. And if we jump onto the next drawing here, that same space again then has been drawn in plan twice with a model photograph of the existing condition. So what you're seeing here is that basically the entire dissertation and this study overall was about redrawing the plan of the Sohn House based on the experiential quality of the architecture, not necessarily what's there physically, but what can be felt almost metaphysically. So here is a part plan of that entrance threshold. So obviously you come in off the street, it has a raised ground floor, there's an antechamber, and then the hallway is broken into, I would argue, 3 spaces. And at the end of that space, we have the beautiful stairwell, which anyone who's familiar with the Sohn House is probably visualizing right now. And this is the plan as it exists, but this, in my opinion, is the plan as it is experienced. The space almost dissolves from 4 to 1 based on how this model photograph suggests the spaces work in sequence. It's almost how the space is contained and broken into multiple pieces, but in section, the space arguably is one space in its entirety. And this works not just across one level, but multiple levels when you introduce the verticality of the stairwell into the mix. And then we take this approach and apply it to the entirety of the ground floor. We can abstract these splays to something like this, and then we can assess the spaces that I consider are of the richest architectural quality. So what you can see is the rate in which these intersections occur suggests that there are more spaces visible beyond the vantage point in any location. And that suggests then that spaces such as the reading room and this hallway here to the right, this threshold, which is wonderful space, sequence of spaces, and the breakfast room, and obviously the study at the back, are of an incredibly intense architectural quality. And this just fascinated me as an architectural study. The Sohn House is one of my favorite buildings. It's one of my favorite pieces of architecture. And it's because it has that incredible rich texture to it, spatially speaking. Okay, we know that the Sohn House is good architecture, but what do you really do with this information? And how is this layering the effect of this blending? How does it occur physically. So what you're seeing here on the left is a diagram that I believe was an existing diagram. It was a piece of analysis that basically studied all of the coving profiles that exist within the stone house. And then the idea then was to take one of the existing coving details and remove it from the lining and replace it with a roof light. That's it. So then the idea was that, can we get this sort of layering effect that occurs on the ground floor on a singular plane by introducing an opening in the ceiling by removing the coving? Can we get the effect to work vertically also? So what you're seeing here is a before and after photograph where the molding in the ceiling, the cove detail, is removed and then is replaced by the light well. And yes, of course, this is a series of models that prove the point that I'm trying to make. But regardless of whether this thesis is correct, I still think it's an interesting place to begin a study. This was the beginning of the thesis and the portfolio. But before the thesis sort of begins proper, we were taking on a site trip to London. And what was really unique and frustrating about this is that as a unit, I think there was 20 of us, we were not actually assigned a site in London. We were just sort of given London for the week. And it was sort of left to us to go find our own site. So I basically decided to pick a space that I thought was architecturally interesting and quite dramatic in a way. So what you're seeing here now is some photographs of the site itself, just from Google Maps. And I chose a really peculiar intersection at the very top of London. So this is Highgate Village here, where my cursor is at the minute. And it overlooks Highgate Cemetery on the east and the west, and a giant public park. I believe it's called Waterloo Park. And there are some just incredible vistas over the entire city of London. And I just figured this is really dramatic. It's a really cool space. This is where I'm going to build Stone House 2.0. Obviously, that wasn't the idea at the time. I don't know if that was ever the idea, but the idea was I'm going to propose something here in this really dramatic, wonderful part of London in this site. And what you can't quite see in this plan here is where my cursor is that there's this really interesting lane that cuts right between the park and the cemetery and goes all the way down to the city. So what you can see here at the minute is there's terrace, there's a church, there's the cemetery, and there's another cemetery, part of the cemetery below that, and then here's the reverse angle, just to give an idea of how high the sight line is. I think you're looking at something like, I think it's something like 168 meters above sea level at this point in London. Like really is like, it's really as vertical as the city ever gets, which is really interesting in a way. So it's a really unique site condition for an architectural proposal. And furthermore, this sort of site was identified as this sort of grieving landscape, in that obviously we have the cemeteries, we have the history, we have the church. And there was always this idea that my proposal, my thesis, although it was within the context of the housing economy unit, that the proposal would be some form of church or wake house, or how do you say it? What's the word I'm looking for? Not a coliseum. Or like a funeral home of sorts. So then we get back from London and I sort of do nothing for like 2 or 3 weeks. And this really frustrated my tutors, but I just wasn't inspired. So I decided to just go out, buy a piece of A1 tracing paper, set up an old drawing board and just go to town on it and just sort of draw what I was inspired by and what I felt like drawing. So what you're going to see now is a series of those very first A1 pencil drawings that really kicked off the thesis proper. Really what happened here is I set up this A1 page, strapped it into the drawing board, and I just started from the left and went from left to right. And what you're seeing here is just these really early sketch-like technical drawings in a way. So what you can see here is I just sort of start with the street profile and it just goes right off a cliff because I'm proposing this excavated basement layer here. And then I just start drawing what a person would see at any one point and then trying to translate that across sections. So section flows to elevation, to reverse elevation. We have a little bit of plan here. And I just started projecting and sculpting out these spaces from one another. These drawings are incredibly messy. And you'll note that there's some annotations here and there's some different sort of different sort of arrays and just different pieces of detail, and it really just becomes like a giant A1 sketchbook of sorts. Only rather than drawing with the arm, I'm drawing with the wrist, because I've got the parallel rule, I've got the set square, and I can really just make moves really fast. So you can see here there's some indication of section and space and volume and depth. And then there's some indication of circulation here. It looks like a staircase. And then you can see how the perspective line splays here. And really what I'm thinking about is how the spaces in the zone house work. So really I'm already thinking at this point about how do we make this really rich? How do we make this really dense and really architecturally interesting to me? So as I'm working on this drawing, my professor sees it, gets really excited by it. And he's like, give me 10 more. So I was like, yes, sir. So let's go. Let's do some more. So then I'm on this sort of pencil hand drawing journey at this point. And then you're going to see another drawing here now. And you can see even in this drawing, and you have to forgive me, a lot of these original drawings no longer exist physically. Like, they were thrown out in the summer of 2017. My professor did contact me and was like, yo, I got all your drawings. They're in my office, but I can't keep them for much longer. Do you want them? And I was like, I do want them, but I'm already living and working in London now. I'm not coming back to get them. I've already got a job. Throw them out. So we probably did. So I have no idea where they exist now. So what you're seeing here is basically a series of scans and photographs and overlays that were made as part of the thesis project. So this is another one where it's sort of like drawing on top of drawing on top of drawing. So you can see faintly that original drawing, the one that we just looked at here, is actually underneath this, and it goes again and again and again, and the drawings all stitch into one another. But what you can also see, if you've got a keen eye, is that these splays are now being introduced into the plan. And what I'm really interested in here is how we can connect one room to another room to another room visually. And you can see here there's a little bit of an overlay of the zone house in pencil form right here. But then there's also like these 1 to 5 technical details here. It looks like I've drawn the screw through like a window frame into some brickwork. And then there's some isometric action happening here as well. But this is actually a little bit of a later drawing that's been included. And then we're going to go on to the next one. And then I'm sort of drawing the site as well at the same time. So it's important to note that I've got one drawing board and I'm only ever working at one drawing at one time, but then occasionally I'll get a little bit bored and I'll overlay that drawing with another one, work on that one, and then go drawing. So I'm just like spinning plates. I'm just working over the drawings all the time. And you can see that they're obviously, the drawings do have a scale. I think they were all like 1 to 50 roughly, but then sometimes I'll just pivot into other scales at the same time. So like I've got this little planimetric drawing of the site, and you can see how Swan Lane here cuts down and breaks off to Waterloo Park. I'm just sort of drawing the terrain. I've got this some sort of structure here that's overlooking the city, but I don't quite know what it is. And at the same time, I'm also testing these ideas in model. So really, I go from this drawing here, and then it's like, this is an interesting section. How does it work in 3D? I'm testing it in 3D, and then I go back to the drawing, and then the drawing obviously has more detail. This is a little bit clear, and I'm drawing it in the context of the site at all times as well. So I think it's important to note that even though I don't really understand what this building is going to be at this time, I'm always very aware of the nature of the site itself. I'm aware of the sight lines. I'm aware of the fall, the gradient of the landscape itself. I'm aware of the existing context. Okay, so this isn't being drawn in isolation. Okay, it's being considered. And then on the right here, there seems to be this like exploded axonometric, where you can see even here that I'm introducing the coving details, because like I mentioned previously, I am really interested in how there is this tension between how the space looks from the outside and how it is actually experienced on the inside, and how lining is curated to dictate our impression of a space, and how we measure the thickness and the depth of a space. That's all lining. It's all artificial. It's all fake. And I think that's amazing. I think that's really exciting. So lining is going to come into this eventually. And then I have another part of a plan here. So you can see that even just within the space of a week or two, we go from this sort of, I don't know what it is, dreamlike idea of a space to, consideration for structure, thickness, door openings. Like, it really does just jump along quite quick through drawing. It only happens through drawing. Like, I'm only able to do it with the pencil and the parallel rule and the set square. Don't know why, but a computer just wouldn't help me at this point. And then again, you can see here a photograph of me actually working on it, very meta. And then this isn't a great photograph here on the left, but it's another version of the plan. So you're seeing here that what I'm doing at the minute is, maybe if we go back to the site plan, there's an existing terrace. And really what I'm proposing is a house here right on the end that moves into the park itself. So basically, I'm going to take over part of this house here, and I'm going to build as far as I can over the park. So I'm really going to take the zone plan methodology, and then I'm going to just see how far I can go with it to maximize the drama and the spatial tension within the house. That's really what I'm about here. So I just want to see how extreme. Can I turn it up to 11? Let's find out if I actually get there. And that's what you're seeing here with this. So again, there's a space here that intersects visually with other spaces. There's part of the existing terrace where at this time I've taken over. You can see there's an existing terrace floor plan here, goes into this one, and then it's like ding, 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 and then there's a tree line here, and there's an existing wall, and I'm really just drawing everything here. I really just have permission at this point to just go wild, and it's so much fun. Like, you can see that there's enthusiasm in these drawings here. Like, I just love it so much. And then again, there's just another version of it, and you can see here on the drawing board, photograph of the actual drawing board from 2016. There's like hand-drawn surveys of the existing terrace and the semi-detached houses around the street. There's a little bit of a wall survey. There's some basement details I'm drawing. I'm drawing at all different scales at all different times. Again, just another version of the overlay from before, where I'm going from plan to section to elevation. Little 1 to 5 details down here, everything. I'm just drawing everything I can. Like, I'm really building an understanding for what this piece of architecture is going to be at this point. Problem is that I've got a midterm review coming up, and I just freak out, and I'm like, nothing's finished. I need some final work. So what do? I completely freak out. I stop, just drop the pencil, and I run back to CAD. And I'm like, I'm just going to draw up what's in my head now, everything that I've got here on these pages, and I'm going to see what I get. And this is what we're looking at. Now, I would argue that it's a little bit boring, but they're not bad drawings. But you can see here's the site plan. It's really a bit unfinished, and we've got sort of one house at this point, even though the vision for the project is that it will become many houses along here. We've just sort of got the first house. So this is sort of the culmination of all the drawings here, that we've got a little bit of a colonnade. We've got a house across 3 stories. There might be a basement. We've got different architectural languages on each floor. It's a little bit of an odd house. It's like a little treasure box almost of like little different ideas. It's got a little pitch roof to respond to the context, but the pitch roof also has a false depth. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And this is sort of just where I got to. And these computer drawings were received just fine, but I ended up having a meeting with my tutor after the review, and he was sort of like, we know you can draw with a computer. We know you can do 3D models. It's like, I'd prefer it if you just spend the final semester now, like the remaining 12 weeks, just going as far as you can with the pencil drawing. And I was like, yes, sir, let's go. So that's exactly what I did. So then I've got this like 1 to 200 sketch that I've just blown up here. And you can sort of see at this point that it's like, there's the house, there's the existing terrace here. There's this house that I'm working on, and the house sort of pivots off at 45 degrees into a second house, and then pivots back again into a third house. And there's some idea for circulation, and it's built against this tree line, and it's built against this wall. And you can see even at like 1 to 200, I'm sketching like, you know, like the pavement texture. I'm doing like the stair treads. Like, although the drawing is like a 1 to 200 scale, I'm drawing at like a 1 to 50 scale. I don't know why I was doing that. It's just a bit of a weird thing to do. And then I just start getting into 1 to 50 scale again. So what you're seeing here now is this is like a 1 to 50 plan drawing based on this sketch. So obviously it's more resolved. But I'm still sort of struggling to... I keep getting caught in the first house. Like, I'm not able to go to house 2 and house 3. Because I think at this point it's like it's going to be 3 houses all built as one house. But I can't get beyond the first house because I just keep getting caught up in what this space is going to be. You can see here at this point, the way to get around the level is that there's a public stairway here off the street that takes you down into the park underneath a bridge that I'm using to connect to the existing terrace. But then in off the street, you can come in at street level where the house is set back. You can go down into a basement, down here, into this basement here. Or you can go through another bridge into the house itself. So the house is sort of like an island set back from the street on a level on its own, which I was just really interested in, this idea of separating the house from land almost, landlocking it in a way. And you can see that there's the remnants of the 45-degree pivot here, but then it just doesn't really go any further. So it just turns right back into the orthogonal arrangement that we had before. And then you can see that there's different rooms, different spaces, and it is very zone coded at this point, if I do say so myself. But what you might notice is that here I've drawn some coffins. So at this point I have a better understanding of what the brief for this project's going to be. And the idea is that the house on the hill is going to be a traditional Irish wake house of sorts, where people can hold a ceremony, they can hold events, they can hold parties to celebrate the life of a deceased loved one. They can also cremate the body, so there will be a crematorium in the basement, and there will also be a private garden where you can have a private cemetery of sorts that can lock into this sort of grieving landscape that already exists on the rest of the site. But how do you do that? Like, that sounds quite complicated, right? So I have to sort of configure this sequence of space. I have to configure the spaces in a way in which they can flow naturally. But what you'll see here is that there's way too much architectural detail in these drawings. And I want to point out here that there is a concept at this point that anything below ground is made of this weight and mass, and then everything above ground springs above it and is made out of timber. It's timber lining, timber construction. So you've got this sort of lighthouse above, and then you've got this heavy, dense space beneath. The problem is that I still can't resolve one house. How am I going to resolve 3 houses? So my tutor encourages me, says, like, why don't you just push it? Push it now and see how far as you can go. Let's see, as far as you can go. I need a drawing fast. Show me how far you can go with this grieving landscape. So this was like the largest drawing that I produced as part of the thesis. I think this is like a 1 to 200 section. I think it might be 2 pages cut together somewhere. And you can see here that this was the street level. This is the basement with the heavy hatch. And then we have these light pavilion-like timber structures spring up above them. So you've got house 1, house 2, house 3, and then this sort of catacombs of sort of just continue all the way down. It's too much. It's too much. So now, before I didn't have enough, now I've got too much. And what you're seeing here is like this really delicate perspective drawing explaining how visually all of these spaces would work from an experience point of view. So like these perspectives would all intersect and overlap. And at this point, you're like 8 weeks out from the final presentation. It's like, I'm never going to finish this. So then the professor's like, oh, you've gone too far. Trim it back. And I'm like, okay, no problem. So let's get back to basics. So then you're seeing in the detail of how the basement opening would work. Again, there's 2 versions of this. And at this point, I realized that I'm not moving forward at all. I'm only ever moving sideways. And this is becoming a problem. And people are starting to get worried on my behalf. Professors, tutors included. They're like, hell, you just keep moving sideways. You just keep drawing the same house over and over again. I'm like, I can't help it. I can't stop. So all of a sudden, it's like, you gotta draw things with some sort of finality. Like, you got to do it. You're working at the wrong scale. You got to draw it. And I just realized, it occurred to me at that point, like, I had never drawn a site plan. I just hadn't drawn a site plan. I knew what the site was, but I hadn't drawn a site plan. So I said, you know what? I'm going to spend the next 3 days. I'm going to spend the whole weekend, and I'm going to draw the entire site. And I'm not going to draw the building. I'm not going to draw my proposal at all. I'm just going to draw the site. And at the very end of the weekend, I'm going to put my proposal, whatever it is, in it. And that's going to lock the project in. And then I'm just going to work from outside in. Because at this point, I've only ever been working from inside out, and it's becoming a problem. So what you're seeing here is the site plan that I drew that weekend. It was produced at, I think it's 1 to 400 scale at A1. And I hand drew every single line on this page. I spent the entire weekend drawing it. And I did not add my proposal, this little cluster of houses here, until the very end. And then what I did, and this was a brave and probably stupid thing to do, when I finished adding my proposal in, so you can read it here, there's like 1 roof, 2 roof, 3 roof. When I finished adding my proposal into the drawing, because this was all drawn on 1 piece of paper, there were no layers, it wasn't overlays, it was 1 piece of paper, right? I took the fattest 6B pencil I could, and I sketched in the shadow profile of my proposal. so that there was no going back. This is it. It's locked in. This is your proposal. It isn't getting any bigger. It isn't getting any smaller. This is what I'm working with now. And what you can see here is it's actually one building broken into three buildings. So we have a house at the front, a house at the back, and a house in the middle. And that house is a church. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And then on the right here, you can see there's a sketch, again, that sort of summarizes this from a little bit more of an isometric point of view. It's just a little doodle that explains where it sits in the context of the site. And that's it. This is the proposal now. So I only have like a couple of weeks left before the thesis is over and the portfolio has to be handed in for submission. So I'm a little bit like, got to get a move on. So this is the ground floor plan for the proposal. And I am going to talk about the ground floor plan, how it works in more detail eventually. But this was the final plan drawing at the final presentation. And you'll notice how it was actually put together. So it's 3 A1 size boards. So this is an A1, that's an A1, and this is an A1. And each of them have each of them consist of 3 A1 drawings. So there is the structure, there is, and the external lining, there is the interior lining, and then there is the habitation of the interior lining. And you should be able to read here how you've got people sitting at a desk, someone sitting on a little nook there, you've got some texture, you've got some floor details, you've got some parties going on, you've got some coffins, you've got some caskets, you've got a bike over here. You know, like it's sort of the idea is that there's a piano in the corner. I don't think that piano is to scale, I'm not sure. And not only are you drawing what's happening in the solid, I'm also drawing what's not happening in the void, because I think it's important to explain that the house exists in two ways. It exists for the user, the person who is grieving, but it also exists for the owners of the house and the owners of the property who have to navigate sensitively through these spaces and serve the others in the space. So that's why you might notice here that there's a peculiar wall thickness buildup within all of these rooms. It's approximately 900 mil, just enough for you to get through. In other words, the person who owns the house and works in the house knows how to navigate these spaces efficiently, whereas the people who are visiting the house for the first time, they're experiencing it in the way that they're experiencing the grieving process, and that it's a sequence of spaces in which you move through at specific times of the day for specific parts of the process. So for example, you will come in and there's an arrangement room, there's a breakfast room, you go up, you go down, you go out, there is a ceremony held in the garden, there is a cremation process, there is a church service in the basement, and then there is a giant party at the very end of this sequence. And then what's important is that as you come in on one side and you come through these spaces and you flow and you go down and you go out, and don't worry, I've got the plans to show this in a minute. Then you come up and you have this amazing celebration here, this party, and then you go back out a different way. You go back through this space and you go back out the door you came in. So the idea is that you leave through the door you've come in, but you've been through an experience, an emotional journey as part of the grieving process. Incredibly convoluted. It sort of runs it works in a way like an IKEA, which really wasn't the intent, but it's a loop. You kind of loop and loop and loop. But that was the idea. And what you're seeing here now is a selection of these final drawings, really, all these overlays of these different elevations and different sections and hidden sections through the churches and through the crematorium and through the basement, and the way in which the exterior works in the context of the existing terrace. And again, there's more overlays here. And then there's this section that I just sketched up, and there was this idea of having an invisible section inside the building where the church would occur. And I'm going to show a bit more of that now in a minute, a little bit of a facade sketch. And this is what you're seeing here. So these were like drawings that were produced. This is a photograph. So like I said, the actual drawings are gone. But I had a lot of photographs documenting the drawings as I was making them. Like this one, it's like unfinished. But you can see here how like this basement church structure sits and exists. And it's almost hidden within the lining of the second house itself. This was a previous version of it. And how this plugs into a crematorium and a chimney stack here that's hidden behind the house. You don't see it from street level. And then this is the rear of the first house. And you can see how the split levels and the windows are sort of all very carefully calibrated so as to display your understanding of where you are within the space. Because it's not really about being part of the outside when you're on the inside. It's about having an experience that's real inside the space on the day that you're grieving for a loved one, maybe. I don't know. Very complicated project, unnecessarily so, I would argue. And now we're going to talk about models. So of course, all of these drawings were being produced in the build up to the final review, but I was also making models as well. And you can see that this was my desk at the time. And these are all images that I include in the portfolio if I was going to like a job interview when I graduated. But you can see here that I was building sectional models, I was building plan models, I was just working away, doing everything at the same time. You can see here there's some sketches and some technical details being worked on here. Everything was just sort of being juggled all at once. Like I was never working through the scales. I was working through the scales really quickly and then going back up and back down and just constantly working through the project. And again, we have some more models here, a facade model. And then at the end of the portfolio phase, I wanted to work on some technical details. So these were produced at 1:20, and I used the same drawing approach as I did for the plan, where everything's layered on top of one another. So they're all sort of misaligned here. You can see in the photograph, which isn't great. And also, like these aren't annotated, but the idea was showing the false thickness of the wall buildups and how the exterior has one particular language, but then the interior is all very solid and has a curvature and a coving to it, a little bit like stone. And then we have some more interior model photographs to demonstrate that a little bit further. I think the models are more successful than the technical details. I didn't really want to do these technical details. I just felt like I just should have some sort of like 1:20 level information as the project came to an end. And then again, two 1:50 sections showing two different parts of the house. And an isometric with the lining, exterior lining, and an isometric with the interior lining. So this was actually one drawing on 2 pages. And then again, there's little part sections, some more overlays. And again, another plan from a different orientation, and sort of the way that we have this external skin can just sort of sit on top of all the drama of the interior. And again, just some more experimental drawings showing the basement plan in sketch form, a version of the section. I think this was 1:100. Computer drawing underneath here. I'm going to talk about computer drawings in a minute. And that was the academic portfolio. So basically the portfolio consisted of all those drawings at A1. The problem is that when I graduated then, I didn't have the drawings anymore. I only had photographs of them and I needed to be able to tell a story. And the biggest mistake, and I want to clarify, I finished the master's program. I scored really well on this project, so I knew that it was academically strong, and I think I finished in like the top 10 in my class. So like I graduated with a distinction, so I knew the work was good, but I needed to get a job. So what do you do when you've got just basically like 100 unfinished A1 drawings that you no longer have access to? So I tried to tie together like a story and a narrative, which is what I've sort of shown you here today. But you're going to see in a minute that this does exist as a physical portfolio. But when I graduated, like the first thing I did, I got a job interview like really quick. And I went to this giant commercial architecture practice, and I only had photographs of the drawings. And the 2 partners who interviewed me, they liked the drawings. We would like to hire you. Our problem is that the unfinished nature of this work suggests to me that you are a candidate, or you would be an employee who never finishes work. And I remember being really frustrated by that comment because that actually wasn't the case. I was only given permission to work this way by my tutor because I'd already demonstrated that I was very capable of finishing work. However, the storytelling of the project is what let me down. See what I mean? Storytelling is important. My audience didn't understand that, so they just saw all these messy drawings and were like, this guy's chaotic and a mess. And I am a little bit like that. And that's why I've included the final chapter here, which is the prologue. So what happened next? I had this design, I had these drawings, I had all this unfinished work, and I really wanted to finish the project. So I took it into computer. I took it into the computer and I just started drawing it up. And I started making 3D models and I started making all these 3D images. And this is a selection of these images that you're going to see now. So I built this like 3D structural model. I did this like 3D isometric drawing that shows the entire structural frame for the house. And then I started breaking all of the rooms into little projects in themselves and then annotating them correctly and creating these little diagrams for them. So you can see here's a quite banal 2D site plan, elevation drawing. And then this is like the comprehensive 1 to 50 floor plan. And it also goes with a basement plan that explains the entire sequence of the project. Now, in my defense, this drawing should be annotated, and the drawing was annotated. So there is a, you should be able to see a PDF version of this now, or you should be able to see a video. There's a physical version of this you should be seeing now that has the annotations on it that explains how every single room works in the context of the thesis, and how every single room works in the basement as well. The problem is that I no longer have that PDF. I don't know where it went, so I only have the base file. So you're just seeing the drawing here now. But I assure you, do not go to a portfolio interview without having your plan annotated with like a north symbol and everything. So what I'm saying is I do have that. You can probably see it now in video. It's in the physical portfolio, but it's not in this PDF. And then obviously I'm just making some more 3D models, and I'm actually complementing the 3D images with the hand drawings to sort of demonstrate the richness and consideration for each of these spaces. So it's my way of saying, trust me, it's been considered. One of the basement spaces, a technical detail, some more of that. Again, like just these very painterly, minimalist interior renderings showing the complexity of the space and the split level, and the different openings and the way in which the light work, the way in which the staircase works. Like, not great 3D models really, but it's really just about explaining the project to your audience. Again, these like plan diagrams explaining how the heading lining and the structures concealed within the wall finishes creates this really dramatic coving detail, views out to the garden. Another version of that drawing, the breakfast room with the ceiling cutaways. And then this drawing is the last drawing I'm going to talk about. This drawing was produced on the morning of a portfolio interview for my dream job, the job that I ended up getting, which was great. And I produced this last minute because I just wanted to just have like a little bit of last little physical kind of drawing, a little bit of a flourish in the portfolio. And I like produced this really quickly, just as like pen on paper, how fast can I just sort of draw my vision for what the project is, which is a series of intersecting spaces that all kind of come together, blah, blah, blah. So that's what you're seeing here. Now, I just want to be really clear about something. This is my academic portfolio, and it's the portfolio basically that I used for a job. And you can see the physical portfolio here now, probably, if you're watching this in video. I just want to explain something. This is a very peculiar portfolio journey. I would not advise most students to go this way. It's just more about how I was treated as a student. And my concern when I graduated was that I wouldn't be able to get a good job because I wasn't demonstrating CAD skills. When the reality is that these drawings got me invited to maybe 7 job interviews. And I think I got 6 job offers from those 7 interviews. So it's my way of saying CAD skills are important. They are important. I had CAD skills before I worked on this thesis, but I went into the interview for my dream job, and I had a whole ton of Revit models that I produced in practice when I was like a part 1. And the 2 architects interviewing me were like, "We're not interested. Just show me the hand drawings." And I showed them the hand drawings, and they gave me the job. You know what I mean? So really, maybe if there's a lesson here, it's like maybe your portfolio should be reflective of how what your personality is as an architect, rather than you trying to fake something that you're not. So this portfolio, I talk about it. I mean, it's been 9 years now. I talk about it constantly because it's very personal to me. Like, this is how I work. It's how I worked when I was a student, but even today, professionally, like, I work with pen and paper and pencil and physical models whenever I can. It's just how I like to work. So your portfolio should reflect who you are as a designer, in my opinion. And it's okay to have messy, unfinished work. You just have to make sure you're telling the story the right way. So that's my advice to anybody watching this. As long as your portfolio is telling a story, a good story, then I think you're going to be okay. And I hope this was useful. This is my first director's commentary for my own work. So if you like this, let me know in the comments. Hit me with a like, hit me with a subscribe to the channel. That would be fantastic. And let me know in the comments if you have any questions. And until next time, all the best and goodbye.